That sea of flags. A palace that turns to gold.
The Jubilee girl is here!
After 50 years on the throne, a mother waits for a kiss from her son. A fabulous night became an even more remarkable day as the Queen's Golden Jubilee reached its 48-hour climax. What a memory that was in the summer of 2002, as an ecstatic crowd saluted the woman who'd been their sovereign for over half a century. She'd spent a lifetime controlling her emotions in public. On this day, she seemed almost overwhelmed by the wave of love that was reaching out to her. But Queen Elizabeth II would quickly recover her poise. When you've reigned this long, you've acquired the wisdom to treat triumph and disaster much the same. And now, what a rich store of memories she can summon up. From her childhood years to the trials and joys of her long and eventful reign. We're at Windsor Castle, the one the Queen calls home. And the Royal Standard is about to signal Her Majesty's arrival for a remarkable day. It's April the 9th, 2005, and 3 generations of the Royal House of Windsor are gathering for a wedding unlike any other. The guests of honor are the Queen and her grandsons, Princes William and Harry. They're waiting for the bride and groom, Prince Charles, heir to the throne, and Camilla, the new Duchess of Cornwall, who are about to have their union blessed in historic St. George's Chapel. The Queen is reported to have chided Prince Charles for not getting around to it sooner.
By thy blessing, let these rings be to Charles and Camilla, a symbol of unending love and faithfulness.
The wedding has not been a formal one, but its very informality has charmed the crowds waiting outside, who were delighted when the bridal couple joined them. The Queen looked relaxed and pleased to see her son happily married at last. And for the Queen, it must have brought back deeply personal memories of another wedding in a very different time, when in 1947, her marriage to Prince Philip lit up the grey skies of post-war Britain. Indeed, 1947 was perhaps the most memorable year of her young life, for it was then that Princess Elizabeth, heir to the throne, celebrated her coming of age in South Africa with the most important speech of her 21 years.
On my 21st birthday, I welcome the opportunity to speak to all the peoples of the British Commonwealth and Empire, wherever they live, whatever race they come from, and whatever language they speak. I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. But I shall not have strength to carry out this resolution alone unless you join in it with me, as I now invite you to do. I know that your support will be unfailingly given. God help me to make good my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share in it.
No one could have imagined that the baby girl born Elizabeth Alexandra Mary on April the 21st, 1926, would be singled out for such a royal destiny. Her parents, the Duke and Duchess of York, were unusual royals. They preferred the quiet life. They loved playing with their two daughters. Elizabeth had been joined by a sister, Margaret, who was 4 years younger. The Duke was enchanted by his daughters. He called Elizabeth his pride and Margaret his joy. Every year, at a Duke of York's boys' camp, teenagers from deprived homes took part in organized adventures. The Duke loved joining everyone in the sing-along. He'd bring the whole family along for the action numbers. But those carefree days would soon be over. In January 1936, Elizabeth's grandfather, George V, died. She knew that this meant that her father's older brother would now become King Edward VIII. Edward, the 42-year-old bachelor, felt burdened by the responsibility. Besides, he was obsessed by his mistress, the American divorcee Wallis Simpson, whom he wanted to marry. Parliament and the Church of England were implacably opposed. And then the unthinkable happened. Edward abdicated.
You all know the reasons which have impelled me to renounce the throne. But you must believe me when I tell you that I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king as I would wish to do without the help and support of the woman I love. And now we all have a new king. God bless you all. God save the king.
Princess Elizabeth was 10 years old when she heard that her father was the new monarch.
Only once or twice in the life of each one of us comes such a day as this, when we realize that we're watching history in the making, when we know that generations of Englishmen to come will look back on this day. For May the 12th, 1937, will be one of the dates in English history that the school children will learn, maybe 1,000 years from now.
Now, as King George VI rolled towards his coronation in the famous gold coach, the crowd's cheers were partly of relief. There'd been rumors all week that the painfully shy monarch might be overcome by nerves. Inside Westminster Abbey, Princess Elizabeth was looking on in awed fascination as the Archbishop wrestled with the crown that would dominate this ancient ceremony. Now, is that the front or the back?
The king is crowned. The peers acclaim their sovereign.
Elizabeth, wearing a coronet for the first time, studied the order of service as the coronation ceremony moved towards its stately close.
We join with London, with the Empire, with the world, in crying, God save our King and Queen.
And there she was on that royal stage, the Buckingham Palace balcony, the one where royalty took their bows. Her beloved grandmother, Queen Mary, gave both young princesses a few lessons on how to wave to the crowns below. More than ever now, as the young princess accompanied her parents on their tours of duty, she was aware of how much her life had changed. Wherever she went, she'd be on display as the next sovereign. It became a familiar sight. Two young princesses dismounting from a limousine with their mother, the Queen, close behind them, as guide, protector, and example.
Our royal family is on holiday in Scotland, arriving for the church bazaar, the tiny village near Balmoral. The princesses behave like any children anywhere in the world, bringing pennies out of tiny handbags to pay for sweets and toys, and afterwards a royal mother graciously poses with her children.
Who would have guessed then how their roles would change? For over 60 years later, Queen Elizabeth II, with Sister Margaret in support, is guiding and protecting her mother, who was celebrating an almost incredible occasion, the day she became 100 years old. And for a moment, the decades melted away. Memories of good times, and dark ones too.
From the classroom to the street, these children can learn because of her. She is their only hope. Street Teachers, tonight at 10:30.
All that hatred, all that trauma on the next episode of CSI.
Enough!
Will once again kill some innocent lives. Mega hit 900, CSI New York, Thursday night at 9.
滴到我杯雪糕。
滴濕我頭。
哎呀，滴花咗個妝啊！
哎呀，滴污咗我啲衫，咁咪犯法噶喎。
上冷氣機唔滴水，好易啫，好似我哋咁，定期揾師傅睇下，咪得咯。
等我揾管理處，叫樓上快啲揾人整翻佢部機至得。
20,000 zebras, 500,000 gazelles, 1.2 million wildebeest, and 500 kilometers to go. Serengeti, Assault on the Mega Herd, Tuesday night at 10.
The war had come to Britain, and German bombers were raining fire and destruction on cities trying to break the nation's will. They failed, partly because the royal family set an example that encouraged their people to be at their very best. Elizabeth joined in with a radio broadcast to children in every corner of the Commonwealth.
Thousands of you in this country have had to leave your homes and be separated from your fathers and mothers. My sister Margaret Rose and I feel so much for you, as we know from experience what it means to be away from those we love most of all. To you, living in new surroundings, we send a message of true sympathy, and at the same time, we would like to thank the kind people who have welcomed you to their homes in the country. I want, on behalf of all the children at home, to send you our love and best wishes, to you and to your kind hosts as well. Good night and good luck to you all.
By the late summer of 1940, the war had switched to the streets. German bombers came night after night, and thousands of Londoners sheltered in the underground. Elizabeth's parents, the King and Queen, had sent both their daughters to safety, yet chose to stay on in London themselves, sharing the terrors of the Blitz with their people. Even when Buckingham Palace itself was bombed, the royal couple refused to move. The Queen cast her eye over her bombed home and made a remark that Londoners would never forget. Indeed, it will be echoed 60 years later at her 100th birthday commemoration.
Together, you stood with your people during the long nightmare of the Second World War. When Buckingham Palace was badly damaged, you famously declared, "I'm so glad we've been bombed. It makes me feel I can look the East End in the face."
A treasured birthday memory for the young Elizabeth would be her own elevation to Colonel-in-Chief of the Grenadier Guards, an appointment that marked her 16th birthday in 1942.
Wearing the gold grenade badge of the Grenadiers in her hat, Princess Elizabeth makes her first military inspection. And the final pose picture taken at the end of the review may be regarded as a record of the first official occasion in the life of England's future Queen.
A year later, the whole royal family were seen riding bicycles, setting an example for the nation by using pedal power to save petrol, and even turning the lawns of their summer home Sandringham into wheat fields. The king had insisted that the royal family live by the same ration book rules as their subjects. It was a lesson the rapidly maturing Princess Elizabeth would take to heart, as at 18, she'd reached the age where she'd be eligible for the armed services. And soon after this birthday ride for the cameras, she'd join up. She had to mix with ordinary rankers and get used to being ordered around. Soon, she was doing the practical exam, changing a wheel on a Red Cross ambulance, and then displaying her skills with the full toolkit as she cajoled an engine into life. All under the half-amused, half-critical eyes of her parents, wondering perhaps why their daughter looked so radiantly happy. They knew that she'd passed her driving test and that the end of the war was in sight. Yet when VE Day arrived, victory had a special resonance for the princess. Elizabeth was secretly in love with a sailor. The nation's fighting men were coming home, and among them was a bearded Prince Philip of Greece, whose picture she'd kept in her bedroom throughout the war. They'd first met in 1939, when Philip was a naval officer cadet and had stayed in contact. He'd visited her when he'd been on leave, and they'd written to each other every week. It was clear that he was a real contender for the princess's hand. But their romance didn't become public until Philip escorted Elizabeth to a society wedding in 1946.
And what a thrill there was when we saw the royal family. The two princesses made really beautiful bridesmaids, and on the steps of Romsey Abbey, tall young Prince Philip of Greece was waiting for them. The old abbey, the flowers, the crowd, everything was ideal. As Prince Philip spoke to them, I wish you could have seen Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret. They were wearing the most marvelous medieval dresses in forget-me-not blue.
But was this romance going to lead to a formal announcement? We wouldn't know for 3 months, as the princess was about to join her parents on an important tour of South Africa.
Aboard HMS Vanguard with the royal family. Sunshine, good food, everything that goes to make the perfect holiday. But to the British Crown, it is a duty of the greatest significance. But see it first as a holiday. After 3 weeks of continuous sunshine, the princesses join in daily games on the decks. At the crossing of the equator, everybody attended the traditional ceremony of crossing the line. The crew went all out to make it a memorable occasion. The princesses had their faces powdered with giant puffs.
In truth, there was a double purpose: to shore up what was left of the empire and to test the strength of their daughter's love for Prince Philip. This benign royal invasion, a takeover bid for the hearts of a nation, began and ended in Cape Town. It was here that Princess Elizabeth found herself playing a starring role as South Africans celebrated her 21st birthday. It was very much a working day. She made that famous radio broadcast in the morning, and in the afternoon endured some amateur entertainment from local students.
I am very glad to see so many young people here today. And I would like to thank you all for your greetings and good wishes on my birthday.
The weeks passed in a social merry-go-round that mixed parades of debutantes with gala openings, now and then enlivened by a Zulu dance troupe. But now, it was time to leave for home. And as the royal party boarded the Vanguard, one family member was counting the hours till the ship docked, even encouraging the helmsman to steer a faster course. For Elizabeth, the voyage became happier with every sea mile passed. There was time for a photo of the whole ship's company, and then home, where a now 21-year-old Elizabeth's heart was. Her engagement to Prince Philip was announced almost at once. And just 4 months later, the nation rejoiced, as on November the 20th, 1947, a coach drawn by white horses carried Princess Elizabeth to Westminster Abbey on her wedding day. Londoners in their tens of thousands lined the route to cheer the princess that they'd watched grow to womanhood during the war years. There were those who had questioned the match, some of their royal relatives among them, but not the king. He liked the brash, independent Philip. Today, Elizabeth's handsome bridegroom would win 1 million hearts. And now, as the crowds rolled towards Buckingham Palace, it seemed as though half of London was waiting for the bridal couple to emerge. In a Britain still recovering from its war wounds, the wedding of a princess, one next in line to the throne, shifted the national mood from gloom and pessimism to a lightness of spirit not seen since the end of the war. Elizabeth knew even then that she'd found a true soulmate, one who would suffer the glare of the public eye without complaining. Well, not too much. The couple honeymooned at Broadlands, the Hampshire home of Lord Louis Mountbatten, Philip's uncle, who'd encouraged the romance, possibly even planned it. In the decades that lay ahead, there would be inevitable strains on the marriage. But Philip's support of his wife would never falter. In good times and bad times, through their middle years and their remarkably youthful old age, Philip would be more than a consort. He would be her most trusted friend and advisor.
I have done my best with Prince Philip's constant love and help. He is someone who doesn't take easily to compliments, but he has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years. And I and his whole family, and this and many other countries, owe him a debt greater than he would ever claim, or we shall ever know.
Just a year after their wedding, on November the 14th, 1948, Elizabeth completed her most important royal duty, producing a future heir to the throne, a boy named Charles, proudly brandished before the world by his father. And then, 12 months later, a second child arrived, Princess Anne. The royal photographers recorded these treasured moments in the life of a happy royal family. These were sunlit times. Elizabeth's husband was pursuing his naval career based on the island of Malta, and she was with him, enjoying the freedom of being able to spend time like an ordinary wife and mother. And then, early in 1952, the couple deputized for the king, who'd been ill, on an African tour that began in Kenya. They were staying at a hunting lodge when shocking news reached them.
It was announced from Sandringham at 10:45 today, February the 6th, 1952, that the king, who retired to rest last night in his usual health, passed peacefully away in his sleep earlier this morning.
The princess we knew as a girl and watched in the even growth of her stature comes back to meet her ministers as queen. The little girl we knew has become Queen Elizabeth. The love we gave her has become allegiance.
Whereas
it hath pleased Almighty God to call to his mercy our late sovereign lord, King George VI of blessed and glorious memory, we do now hereby, with one voice and consent of tongue and heart, publish and proclaim that the high and mighty Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary is now, by the death of our late sovereign of happy memory, become Queen Elizabeth II.
Tonight, live from Chantilly Racecourse, a once-in-a-lifetime chance for 3-year-olds. The French Derby, the Prix de Jockey Club. Top-class racing. Catch it at this time on ATV.
It's all over? Think again. Here comes the next gourmet challenge. New York on fire. Leisure Time. Man versus food. Monday night at 8:30.
Current events. Controversial issues. In-depth accounts of the latest news and happenings that impact us all. Get to the heart of the matter. Get the inside story. Tuesday evening at 6:55.
The heartwarming stories of the families in the wild. Love. Survival. They'll tell you what's truly important in life. Documentary World. Raw Nature. Saturday night at 8:30.
The Earth has given us an ultimatum. 90 years from now, 2/3 of the Amazon forest will be gone. How can you not see it? All about documentary Climate in Crisis, Thursday night at 10:05.
Elizabeth, who'd become the new monarch the moment her father died, was following exactly the route that her father had taken in the same gold coach 16 years before. It was June the 2nd, 1953, and she was about to be crowned. As Queen Elizabeth II made her way past the noble lords and ladies, she would have remembered the words of her parents. Once you've been crowned, you're changed forever. Everyone close to her would sense a surge of new confidence. For now, she moved with the graceful certainty of a woman who commanded loyalty and love. Once a year, the Queen's busiest day comes on her ceremonial birthday, when she plays the starring role before a worldwide audience in The Trooping of the Colour. It's an official birthday parade, usually celebrated on the second Saturday in June. Her real birthday is on April the 21st. The ceremony has featured birthday performances by mounted sovereigns since 1748. Trooping of the Colour is the ancient ceremony in which the regimental flag is paraded by the troops, so that they'll recognize it in the smoke of battle. The Queen's experience of this spectacular event began early. She rode out with her father in 1947. And as Queen, she has taken the salute every year of her reign, except in 1955, when it was cancelled by a national rail strike. The Queen's favourite mount for nearly 2 decades was the splendid bay Burmese, a gift from the Canadian Mounties. She first rode him with characteristic style in 1969, a year which brought a thrilling contrast between tradition and the supermodern, as a sensational new aircraft saluted the palace.
It had been a day to remember.
The nation also gets to see their queen in the full splendor of her imperial robes and crown when Her Majesty presides over the annual state opening of Parliament. This is the day when the symbolic power of the monarchy is displayed, and so are its limits. The Queen has to seek the permission of the House of Commons before she can venture into its chambers. A herald called Black Rod beats on the door with his staff to ensure entry.
Mr. Speaker, the Queen commands this honourable House to attend Her Majesty immediately in the House of Peers.
As a constitutional monarch, the Queen has the right to advise and consent with her prime ministers, but no power to legislate.
My government, in cooperation with the other members of the Commonwealth and with our allies, will continue to work for peace and security.
Her annual speech from the throne, listing the governing party's policies, is written for her by them.
Will be to use all available means to achieve a negotiated settlement of the conflict in Vietnam.
The noble lords who greet the Queen include distinguished parliamentarians that the Queen has seen come and go. In her reign, she's advised a dozen successive premiers, but Winston Churchill, who'd known her as a young girl, remained the Queen's unchallenged favourite. He'd become a loving father figure after the death of her own father. Her relationships with other prime ministers have always been cordial, and her weekly audiences with premiers held on condition that her opinions and advice remain confidential. But politics is forgotten when the Queen rides out on the road to Ascot, the famous racetrack just a brisk canter from Windsor Castle. It's a place of wonderful royal memories. The Queen travels there for all 5 days of the royal meeting, in a carriage drawn by Windsor Greys. It was the Queen Mother who passed on her passion for horse racing to her daughter, who hasn't missed a royal Ascot in 60 years and has cheered on 20 of her own winners at the royal meeting. Known for centuries as the sport of kings, horse racing in our time has become the sport of queens. For in 1960, Elizabeth and Philip surprised everyone by producing a third child, Prince Andrew, and in 1964, a fourth, Prince Edward. In 1969, at Carnarvon Castle in Wales, the Queen's eldest son, Charles, now approaching his 21st birthday, was given a present that he would never forget. In a ceremony that echoed the medieval rituals that had honoured other heirs to the throne, Charles was invested Prince of Wales by his sovereign and mother. It was an occasion designed to remind a modern prince of his royal responsibility.
I, Charles, Prince of Wales, do become your liege man of life and limb, and of earthly worship. And faith and truth I will bear unto thee, to live and die against all manner of folks.
Only the Queen has the power to raise the status of her son. The Queen had grown up with seafaring men, so she knew all about yachts. Back in 1953, she'd been presented with one of her own.
For many months, there has been speculation about the name of the new yacht, and there's an air of expectancy as Her Majesty steps forward to perform the actual launching ceremony.
I name this ship Britannia. I wish success to her and to all who sail in her.
Her Majesty releases the traditional bottle, not of champagne this time, but of Empire wine. Soon the Britannia will become a home for the Queen, the Duke and their children.
Britannia was a floating palace, bearing its royal passengers across the world's oceans. But for Elizabeth, it was something more, an alternative home. For 44 years, it would be where Elizabeth and Philip would share their most private moments. In 1953, they began a 6-month tour of the Commonwealth countries that had once been part of the Empire. It was the young Queen's self-appointed duty to bind the parts of that empire into a brotherhood of equals and to see as much as possible of the peoples and countries of the Commonwealth. In New Zealand, she was called on to act as head of state.
In Wellington, Her Majesty opened Parliament, the first time a reigning monarch had presided at a New Zealand parliamentary session. Sydney Harbour came in sight. Another great reception was awaiting the Queen of Australia.
In other countries, she was just there to strengthen the bonds between boisterous ex-colonies and the mother country, and salute their proud independence, or to listen to the distant drum of a very different culture. That long Commonwealth tour would be the first of many for the globe-trotting Queen. She's been several times to India, the largest member of the expanding Commonwealth. The Queen ventured further north into the mountain kingdom of Nepal on elephant rides. And even a tiger hunt, one of the last of its kind. Tigers would soon be threatened with extinction. Even the Queen had to wear slippers before entering the Taj Mahal. In the spectacular landscape of Ethiopia, she was Emperor Haile Selassie's guest. Then, on one of her most significant diplomatic missions, she traveled to the country famous for its special relationship with Britain, America, now celebrating its 200th anniversary. The Queen would begin her tour in New York with a speech that praised the city's great diversity and the way it had opened its arms to the poor of all nations.
Many of those immigrants even believed that the streets of New York were paved with gold. But if there is no gold on the streets, this is preeminently a city of enterprise, quality, and achievements. And I am honored to receive its citizenship and thank you warmly for it.
Throughout her reign, the Queen has spent much of her diplomatic time charming visiting heads of state, dazzling them with palace banquets. One of her favorites was President Ronald Reagan, who adored pageantry and all things royal. During one of his state visits, Reagan, a former Hollywood cowboy, took a boyish delight in riding through Windsor Park with the Queen. She formed a warm relationship with the president and his wife, Nancy. Her ideal head of state, though, was a man of glowing charisma, Nelson Mandela, president of the new democratic South Africa that had rejoined the Commonwealth family. "1997 would bring an end to the Queen's happy sailing days. A new government had decided that in the jet age, a royal yacht was too expensive to run. After 968 voyages and more than 1 million sea miles, the Britannia was being decommissioned.
Explore the Musée de l'École de Nancy, the home to Art Nouveau, where architecture, design, and art are blended together, all about documentary. Art Museums of the World, Monday night at 10.
sick men of East Asia, to the hard-to-ignore sport power on the international stage. China is one to watch in the 2012 Olympic Games. Glamour of sport, the Olympic dream, every Saturday night at 8:30.
International affairs that concern all of us. Comprehensive research and thorough reports on the most pressing issues. Let's focus on the events that truly matter. Check in current news, in focus, every Tuesday night at 8.
If you made choices of schools for central allocation for your child in January this year, please return to the specified Central Allocation Centre on either June 2nd or 3rd to collect the Primary 1 registration form. Please bring along your copy of either the application form or the Choice of Schools form for identification purposes. Remember, you will have to register your child on June 5th or 6th with the allocated school.
What happens now could be prevented in the future. What was impossible yesterday might become possible tomorrow. Let's find out how science makes our world a better place. Tomorrow Today, Saturday night at 7. The ultimate cruise experience. Anyone can become his new friends. Anything can happen. This is going to be an adventurous journey. All about documentary, Globe Trekker, Friday night at 10. They can drive you nuts. From the most powerful roaring on Earth to the sexiest bodies you will ever see. They're surely every man's dream. Drive It, every Monday evening at 6:55.
The Queen's memories must be a mixture of joy and sadness. Like that unforgettable day in 1981, when her son, Charles, married Lady Diana Spencer, a union that promised so much, but that would end unhappily for both parties. The Queen's daughter, Anne, married Mark Phillips, but their marriage ended in divorce. Prince Andrew, her second son, seemed to be happily in love with the boisterous extrovert, Sarah Ferguson. But despite the Queen's obvious pleasure at the match, it would eventually dissolve in scandal. Between them, the Queen's own children would exceed Britain's already high divorce rate. Only the union of Prince Edward, her youngest son, and Sophie Rhys-Jones has endured. Some memories are almost too painful to remember. Like that dreadful morning in 1992, when the Queen was told that Windsor Castle, her beloved home, was on fire. She rushed to the spot and paced around the castle in anguish. It seemed as though a lifetime of precious memories had vanished in smoke. An entire wing had been destroyed. It was the cruelest blow of all in a year she wanted to forget. Her children's private lives had embarrassed the House of Windsor, and now fire had left part of the family home in ashes. As 1992 dragged to its end, the Queen made the most world-weary speech of her reign.
1992 is not a year on which I shall look back with undiluted pleasure. In the words of one of my more sympathetic correspondents, it has turned out to be an annus horribilis.
Who would have believed that worse could follow 5 years later, when the nation was traumatized by the tragic death of Princess Diana? The Queen, at first criticized for not making a public display of her grief, chose to bow to Diana's coffin as it passed. As the 21st century began, the Queen would rejoice in the extraordinary celebrations of her mother's 100th birthday. Sadly, she would lose her beloved sister Margaret 18 months later, and then just 1 month after that, the Queen Mum would die a peaceful death and be mourned by the people that she'd served so long and so well. Yet the Queen and her husband sailed through every storm, thanks to what Prince Philip called the Queen's special gift.
I think that the main lesson that we've learned is that tolerance is the one essential ingredient of any happy marriage. And you can take it from me that the Queen has the quality of tolerance and abundance.
The gold coach seemed to glow in the June sunshine as never before. It was the summer of 2002, and Queen Elizabeth, the oldest monarch to celebrate a Golden Jubilee, basked in the warmth of an overwhelming show of love from her people. 50 years on the throne, and looking good for many more. Perhaps the Queen remembered another time when she stood on that palace balcony, when her father was king, and the nation acclaimed the royal family for steering them bravely through the war. And perhaps she remembered how that famous victory had its origins in the men of the invasion force who had stormed the beaches of Normandy in the summer of 1944. And now here she was on the Normandy beaches, where the invasion had been launched, on the 60th anniversary of D-Day, honoring the old survivors of that great battle.
We are all getting older, and while it is sad that this will be the final parade in Normandy, it must not be forgotten. What for you is a haunting memory of danger and sacrifice one summer long ago is, for your country and for generations of your countrymen to come, one of the proudest moments in our long national history. I take it upon myself to express the immense debt of gratitude we owe to you all. I salute you and thank you on behalf of our whole nation.
The Queen was clearly moved to be part of a fine military tradition, one in which her own family has always served. It's one that's touched the heart of her son, Prince Charles, and especially his wife, Camilla, with him on a visit to the graves of British soldiers who had died in Egypt during the Second World War. Camilla's father had lost comrades here in the Battle of El Alamein. The tradition of royal service in Britain's armed forces is as strong as ever, with its latest recruit, a certain Prince Harry, the Queen's grandson. The Queen was delighted to preside over his passing out parade on a day that must have brought back memories of her first passing out parade at Sandhurst, when she was a 19-year-old princess. Right now, however, her eyes were on that smart young guardsman, Second Lieutenant Harry Wales. Meanwhile, back at the office, the year-long celebrations in 2006 of the Queen's 80th birthday were about to begin. She is hosting a remarkable get-together. 99 ordinary people, born on the same day as her, have been invited to lunch.
I doubt whether any of us would say that the last 80 years has been plain sailing. But we can give thanks for our health and happiness, some wonderful memories, and the excitement that each new day brings.
There's something different about this 80-year-old monarch, a spring in her step and a relaxed manner. It's as though she's cast off a lifetime of reserved formality.
My sentiments today are those of a proud and loving son who hopes that you will join with me in wishing the Queen the happiest of happy birthdays, together with the fervent prayer that there will be countless memorable returns of the day.
there's much for the Queen to celebrate. Her grandson, William, a future king, is a prince with a firm grasp of what royal duty entails. He appears to have his mother's empathy for people and his father's respect for tradition. Meanwhile, his younger brother, Harry, has emerged from his wild teenage days and matured into a warrior for the crown, though he did need the Queen's consent before he fought.
Someone had already asked her, saying, are you cool with this? And I think she was like, yeah, splendid idea, yeah, go for it. So she couldn't be more than happy to get rid of me.
After letting her grandson loose in a war zone, the Queen had a diplomatic steeplechase to negotiate while on a state visit to America.
Your turn, Your Majesty.
That is the lesson of my lifetime. Administrations in your country and governments in mine may come and go, but talk we will, listen we have to, disagree from time to time we may, but united we must always remain. Mr. President.
The BBC reported on President Bush's royal gaffes.
The Queen proposed a toast. Mr. Bush then sat, leaving the Queen drinking her toast alone. Another slightly odd moment, but frankly, by now, who cared? The visit had been a success.
You helped our nation celebrate its bicentennial in 1976.
Not many people wink at Queen Elizabeth II. This president did.
She gave me a look that only a mother could give a child.
But when a new generation swept the Obamas to power and they paid a visit to London, Her Majesty seemed much more comfortable.
Can you tell the difference between It's all over. Of course.
When the First Lady put her arm around the Queen, not exactly royal protocol, Her Majesty responded in kind. It was the reaction of a queen who, even in her 80s, is ready to move with the times. Now, in the twilight of her reign, she can look back on a remarkable journey. When she was crowned more than 60 years ago, she was hailed as the symbol of a new Elizabethan age, a bringer of light to the dark post-war years. She became a queen who has never swerved or faltered in her devotion to duty. In the miserable 1970s, she revived the country's spirits with a nationwide celebration of her Silver Jubilee. And she emerged unbowed from the turbulent 1990s and won her people's hearts once again as the star of her own Golden Jubilee. In the 21st century, in an ever-changing world, the Queen remains the calm center of a tempestuous age, a splendid royal servant to her people, a monarch for all seasons.
Episode of Royal Inheritance, The Queen, a Monarch for All Seasons, is now available on ATV's website, www.hkatv.com.